Hey, what's happening, YouTube? This is Joel back. Just wanted to talk about something real quick concerning something that the Aboriginal teachers or followers, some of the information they put out. First, let me just say this. As you notice, I don't really talk too much about the whole Aboriginal movement, and there's a reason for that. Couple reasons. First reason is I felt that if people want to believe that they are American Aboriginals, then fine. That's what they want to believe. That's what they want to believe. So I didn't think it was worth really, making a big fuss about it or whatever. Second reason is I thought it was just ridiculous the idea that a black person would have to convince another black person that there was an African slave trade. But this has spread so much and it's got so many people, so many of our people hooked that I got to start talking about this. And it goes beyond just a belief and a opinion when a lot of the people they actually start conflict on social media. They will argue and try to convince you and tell you something's wrong with you if you still hold to the idea that there was an African slave trade and that's where our origin really is. And it's causing more division, as if we don't already have enough division with the religions, with the Hebrew Israelites, with the Christians, and all these other things. This is the last thing we need as a people is something else dividing us. And I'll get to that in a minute because I think there's something to that and I think it's an agenda. But this is what I wanted to talk about real quick, just one little smidget of something that they say. And that is that Abraham Lincoln was a black man. And I seen a video on this a while ago. It's actually an old video, and this actually might be old news to a lot of y'all. But it's something that I saw recently, and it was like a 2 year old video, but I just kind of put it to the side. Basically, you got people thinking that Abraham Lincoln was really black, and there was this conspiracy to whitewash him and give us fake history on what happened with that. And it's promoted by the same people that say the African slave trade is fake history and there was no African slave trade and that we're really off from here. But what's important is, like I said, not so much that people have differences, but the means by which they're using to give you this information and the length of deception they're using. It's not the same as if somebody had a scripture and they have an interpretation of it and this is what they believe based on something they read and they're just mistaken or they just misheard something or they're just off for whatever reason. To me, that's different than somebody purposely trying to trick you. And that's where I have a problem, especially when it comes to disrespecting our ancestors. So anyway, the other day, a couple days ago, there was a live stream by one of the main Aboriginal people that puts out these videos on YouTube. What's his name? He kind of sounds like Anthony Anderson to me. That guy, Dane Calloway, that's his name. And now listen. Like I said, I've seen this teaching about Abraham Lincoln a while ago. So what I did was I asked him about that because I seen one of his videos where he uses this picture as his video avatar or whatever, but he doesn't get into it in the video, but he uses that picture. It's clickbait really. So I figured that he probably does teach that because that's where it came from, Aboriginal folks, that teaching. So I just asked him in the chat because he was taking questions. I asked him, was Abraham Lincoln black? And this guy took a long, long time to answer that. Now, that's an easy question, right? because during this live stream, he's talking about all this information that he has, all this research he does, and, do you have any questions? That's an easy question. Was he black or was he white? Right? But he's answering all these other questions around my question, all these other people asking questions. But I kept asking it. And I know I was getting on his nerves, but I kept asking and kept asking, kept asking. Same question. So finally, he says his father was black, and that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say right now. He didn't want to get into it. So I kept asking, because that's not what I didn't ask about his father. I asked about him. I kept asking, is he black? Because that's a simple thing. He's answering all these other questions. So I wait and wait and wait again. Long time, right? So finally, he says, yeah, brother, he was black. He was a brother. Now, I was going to play the clip of him saying this, but I just went on there to try to clip the clip so you guys could hear it. This guy cut the video. Look, that video, it was done. This is, I think, the last video he did a couple days ago. He first put it up. There's a thing in the drop down where he's saying for this and other reasons why I have to cut it. But when he first put it up, it was 55 minutes. Now it's like 40 something minutes. The part where he says this and answers my question is now cut out. So you can't hear that part. I just now noticed that. He cut that part out. But this is what he said. So you see that I just wanted to hear him say that because I figured he did teach that. Because I already know where it comes from. Because when I first saw that a while ago, that old video, I looked into it and I just did a simple Google search. And this lets me know that these people that are listening to this kind of information and falling for it are doing zero research. Zero. I did a Google search. And this is what I found. This is when you look up Copperhead, Wikipedia, Copperhead. Okay? This is a political group called the Copperheads, is what it's talking about. It says in the 1860s, the Copperheads were a vocal faction of Democrats in the northern United States of the Union who opposed the American Civil War and wanted an immediate peace settlement with the Confederates. In other words, these are people in the North that wanted to prevent a civil war and wanted to make peace with the Confederates. You understand? Confederates who were fighting to keep you and me slaves, right? They picked up arms to fight for slavery, among a lot of other things, but that's one of the main things. So these people wanted to make a deal with them. That's the first thing. It says Republicans started calling anti-war Democrats Copperheads, likening them to the venomous snake. The Democrats accepted the label, reinterpreting the Copperhead as the likeness of liberty, which they cut from Liberty Head large cent coins and proudly wore as badges. Liberty Head large cent coins. Okay? By contrast, Democrat supporters of the war were called War Democrats. If you keep going, it says Copperheadism was a highly contentious grassroots movement. It had its strongest base in the area just north of the Ohio River. Some historians have argued that it represented a traditionalistic element alarmed at the rapid modernization of society sponsored by the Republican Party, and that it looked back to Jacksonian democracy for inspiration. Weber argues that the Copperheads damaged the Union war effort by opposing conscription or the draft, encouraging desertion, and forming conspiracies. But other historians say that the draft was already in dispute, in disrepute, and that the Republicans greatly exaggerated the conspiracies for partisan reasons. Now, the agenda was, it says, during the American Civil War, the Copperheads nominally favored the Union and strongly opposed the war, for which they blamed abolitionists, and they demanded immediate peace and resisted draft laws. They wanted Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans ousted from power, seeing the president as a tyrant destroying American Republican values and despotic and arbitrary actions. Some Copperheads tried to persuade Union soldiers to desert. They talked of helping Confederate prisoners of war seize their camps and escape. They sometimes met with Confederate agents and took money, and the Confederacy encouraged their activities whenever possible. They were in cahoots with the Confederates. They felt Lincoln was a problem. So what did they do? They actually had a paper that they put out. The Copperheads had numerous important newspapers, but the editors never formed an alliance. Wilbur F. Storley made the Chicago Times into Lincoln's most vituperative enemy. The New York Journal of Commerce, originally abolitionists, was sold to owners who became Copperheads, giving them an important voice in the largest city. And it says a typical editor was Edward G. Roddy, owner of the Uniontown, Pennsylvania Genius of Liberty. He was intensely partisan. He was an intensely partisan Democrat who saw African Americans as an inferior race and Lincoln as a despot and dunce. Although he supported the war effort in 1861, he blamed abolitionists for prolonging the war and denounced the government as increasingly despotic. By 1864, he was calling for peace at any price. Copperheads. Remember that when you hear people talking about, oh, well, we're copper-colored people, the copper colors, copper this and copper that. Do you see what I'm getting at? This picture comes from the Copperheads, which is a political group who had a problem with Lincoln and wanted to make a deal, under the table deals with the Confederate, so there wouldn't be a civil war. Now, if you look at this picture, this is one of their pamphlets. This is a Copperhead pamphlet from 1864 by Charles Chauncey Burr, a magazine editor from New York. And they did mockery of Abraham Lincoln, and they made him look black. It's a mockery. It was a joke. And they called him by the name of Abraham Africanus the First, because they looked at him as a tyrant. They looked at him as trying to be in the corner of inferior blacks. So they poked fun at him. How did they do that? By making these pictures. And that's what this picture is, where you see this man dressed up as Abraham Lincoln looking black. That's what that picture is. It's from one of their publications. They're mocking Lincoln. That's all that is. Now, here's another site. This is the Harvard Library. If you go to the Harvard Library website, Houghton Library, look up Harvard's Lincoln. It gives you a little more information on how this mockery was printed. Commander-in-Chief and Great Emancipator, Abraham Africanus I, His Secret Life, as revealed under Mesmeric Influence, Mysteries of the White House, was one of their writings that they put out. And it says, Copperhead Reactions to Lincoln's War Powers and the Emancipation Proclamation. Copperhead Reactions to Lincoln's War Powers. That's what this is about. It says, concerning this article, it says, while many Northerners supported the war against the Confederacy and opposed the enslavement of African Americans, there was a vocal minority, primarily with the Democratic Party, popularly known as Copperheads, who opposed the war and especially the suspension of habeas corpus and the Emancipation Proclamation. Copperheads believe that Lincoln was acting like a dictator by ignoring the Constitution when he issued these edicts. Abraham Africanus I depicts Lincoln making a pact with the devil to become the monarchical ruler of the United States. The Lincoln Catechism poses a series of questions and provides answers that lampoon Lincoln as a dictator named Africanus, Abraham Africanus. It was a joke. Although these pamphlets issued during the 1864 presidential campaign addressed more than Lincoln's policies concerning slavery, they unapologetically used racist language and images to promote their message. This is made clear in 2 questions and answers that appear in the Lincoln Catechism. Look that up. The Lincoln Catechism. Again, these are their publications. Does the Republican Party intend to change the name of the United States? This is what they're writing. It's sort of like a satire, a mockery of what was going on politically. It does. What do they intend to call it? New Africa? So that's where that picture comes from. Now, again, I found this just with a Google search. And like I said, what's disturbing is how easily I found this. And if this is the case, then all this information about documents proving that blacks were Aboriginals and so-called documents proving there wasn't an African slave trade, which he doesn't really, what he really says in a lot of his stuff is he'll say, where are your records, is what he says. There are no records. There are no records. Well, there is records. It's up to you to do some research. And this is another reason I haven't looked into it. I've read books on slavery. So it's going to take more than a YouTube video by Dane Calloway to change my mind about it. I've already read too much on it. So it's not, that's not enough for me to say, oh, there's no records of this and there's no records of that. Oh, wow, that's so deep. Wow, there's no records. How do you know? You haven't looked into it. And you're meaning to tell me that, see, this is why he didn't give any information about this and didn't want to answer that, because this is where this comes from. There's such thing as a fake conspiracy, and then there's real conspiracies. The difference is a real conspiracy, you can have documentation showing that something is inaccurate or that somebody conspired. Like he'll always say, people will say, they hid this and they hid that. They don't want you to know this. Like he said, they won't let you into the Library of Congress to that Abraham Lincoln was black. All these different things, right? They hid this and okay, show me documentation on that. Show me documentation that somebody hid something. These people never do that. That's how you know something's a conspiracy, when you see such and such hid this and they tried to do away with that. That's how you know somebody conspired to do something. A fake conspiracy just tells you that something was hidden. See, they hid this and there's no records of that because they hid, but you haven't proved that there's no records or that records were hidden. You haven't shown that. You just told somebody that, and you're giving all this other information to muddy the waters. And I have trouble believing that a black person just came across that picture and said, oh, I wonder if that's that looks like Abraham Lincoln. Maybe that's really him and he was black. And then they did some research and found out that that's really what the case was. I have a hard time believing that's what happened. Somebody knew what that picture was from and purposely told you otherwise. And me personally, I believe it was somebody white that did it. I don't believe somebody black knew about the Copperheads and decided to use that picture. I believe it's some type of a agenda behind this and behind the whole Aboriginal movement. Why do I think that? Well, they always talk about this FBI warning about black identity extremists. You heard that? Black identity extremists. This is a top priority for the FBI. If you notice, throughout YouTube, a lot of these YouTubers now are attacking blackness, are attacking using the term black. People that say I'm black don't say black. And they mock Africa. A lot of them are doing that now. You notice that? What does that do? Well, first of all, I believe a lot of them probably are, yes. Well, we'll just put it like this without saying too much. In the 60s, you had J. Edgar Hoover, and it's always been a top priority for intelligence agencies to stop, this is according to him, to stop the rising of what he called a black messiah, which means stopping the rising of a charismatic, powerful black leader from rising up again. In other words, no more Malcolms, no more Martins. We're going to put a stop to that. This was a top priority of them. And these type of things didn't stop. So the thing is, how would they find potential leaders like that? Well, they're not going to walk up to the door and say, hey, are you a identity leader or a extremist? Are you? No. How do they find them? They do things to bring them out of the woodwork. And this is why you have all these nuts on YouTube with all these crazy videos. This is why you have these pseudo-religious groups. Because if you are a potential leader for our people, you're going to gravitate to one of these groups because they seem to have a kind of knowledge that you'll be attracted to, or you'll attack these groups. You'll become one of these followers of one of these YouTubers, or either you'll attack them. Either way, like when you throw a smoke bomb, that makes everybody run out and come out so that they can be seen. When they attack black and when they attack Africans, they stir up people that have real knowledge. They stir up people to want to fight and stir up people with real knowledge that'll come out and combat them. And this is, when you talk about informants, I believe this is how they find who threats are. And they send agents out, whether it be YouTube or whatever, to do it in that way. That's my opinion. So, I've spent the last 20 years, studying the Bible only. So, I haven't gotten back to studying history like I used to, which I'm going to now, because I feel now I need to unfortunately, I need to show some information historically that there was an African slave trade and this actually did happen, and eventually I am going to do that. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, and we can't keep falling for this kind of stuff, man. People are falling for this. As black people, we can't keep being gullible like this, man. A Google search, there's too many customs and things we do that's African. Haiti, you look at Toussaint Louverture. In Africa, there's a statue of him, and the people there say that's their kin. Why do they have that there, honoring their kin in Africa if we're not from there? That doesn't make any sense. Why is it in Haiti? Why isn't it over here? Why is it in Africa? Are they confused over there? What about Cinque? Did y'all forget the Amistad? I mean, come on. I mean, There's all kinds of records on the actual court proceedings with that. Like, and they actually went back. Why? If they weren't from there. And you got people that will say, well, that's different. Like Israelites, they'll say the Amistad was different because those weren't Israelites. All these different things. But the thing that people miss is Sinkay's people. That was just one boat that had a revolt. That wasn't the only boat his people got put on. There were other boats that didn't have revolts where his people were taken to. Same people. Now, where did they go? Now, until I really get all that stuff together, there has been some people, our people, that are doing a really good job bringing this out. I think it's really important now that this is done. And shout out to these YouTubers that are some of my favorite YouTube pages, actually. And if you are black, you need to subscribe immediately to these people's page. Like NBK, New Black Knowledge. They have a video. They got videos dealing with this kind of stuff. They got one where Dane Calloway is actually on there live. Make sure you check them out. Dagger Squad, Garfield Reed. Search for Uhuru. Home Team History. You all need to subscribe and support these brothers, all of them. And you know, how would you feel if you were one of our ancestors that were taken and that was jumping off the ships and was going down in that ocean drowning? How would you feel if you knew that your ancestors would one day say, this didn't happen? How do you think they'd feel about that? Oh, that's not real. It don't matter. These people were dying. And I'm not going to disrespect them like that. See, what's really messed up is it shows that our people want to be not African so badly that they will feed into this stuff. They're falling for it. No research. This guy's using racism, blackface. They're using racism to tell you about your history, to tell you this is who you are. This is your true history. Using racism. That's what they think of you. They're making a fool out of you. Somebody's trying to make a fool out of us. And when it really comes down to it, all of this, including a lot of the religion, really what they are trying to and have been trying to do for a long time now is cut you off from your ancestors. That's what they're really trying to do. Because they know what kind of power is behind that. Do your research. Peace. See you next time.